Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit Christmassy. So I've got this picture from Pixabay. I will link this picture down in the description below for those of you that want to go along and take a look at it and maybe print it off. Of course you don't always have to be printing pictures off, you can also work from your monitor or your phone, your tablet. So it's really quite a simple picture. The focus is on this cone here, and then we've got some of the Christmas tree showing, and with some baubles and lights very much in the background out of focus. So what I wanted to do was do the cone and a little bit of the fur of the tree in detail, and then a very soft background in watercolour, just giving the impression of some baubles and lights behind. So the paper that I'm going to be using today I've not used before. This is a new pad that I've just bought, and this is a Daler Rowney mixed media paper in size A4, and you'll see there it says £169, so that's 250 gram. So that's a good weight actually to be working with. I always say try and go above £140 in weight. So we'll give it a go and see what this paper's like. So I'm going to be doing it landscape, so we'll turn the paper over. I'm not going to, sometimes I tape the edge of the pad down, but I'm not going to because I'm not putting a lot of water on this. I'm just going to do some very delicate painting over the top once I've done the drawing, but not adding lots and lots of water. So we'll begin with a few pencil guidelines and just position this cone and make it nice and big. Like I said, this wants to be quite a focal point. And just put the shape of the overall cone in pencil to begin with very lightly, and don't forget we'll be rubbing these pencil guidelines out later on. And then look at the central shape here where it all opens up. You see the tip of one there and another there. And what you're looking for to do here really is just to get the feel of the cone shape. Don't worry about getting every single last one of these in exactly the right place, as long as you're getting that feeling for it being a cone and it being quite open. And we can tighten the drawing up a little once we get in there with the pen. So I'll go ahead now and fit all of these in, opening from the top here, and then as you get closer to the bottom they're coming a bit more towards you. So it's just a case of carefully observing the way it's all going. And one or two of these actually are quite out of focus in the background here, but we'll put them a little bit more in focus. And as you come down to the bottom, they're going to look a lot bigger because they're nearer to us and because they're much more open than those at the top. And you can see more of that curved shape. But we won't go ahead and put loads of detail in because we can put that in with the pen. We're just looking at the shapes there. So then we're going to get this fur going off in this direction. And again, I'm not going to put all these in with the pencil because I can do that quite easily with the pen afterwards. We'll just put that in the direction it's going. One or two here, and again another one here, and I'm not even going to put those into the little leaves there. And then here we've got one sort of spiking out because it's coming towards us. So don't have everything going away from you, have one or two coming towards you as well. This one here is coming towards you, so that's going to be slightly different. And that's the only things that I'm going to do with the pen in detail. Everything else is going to be done in the background first with watercolour before we paint the foreground. So the first thing I'm going to do is to put the detail in with the pen, then do the background, and then I'll come on and do a bit more detail in the foreground. Okay, so I've completed the drawing there in ink, and of course that ink is waterproof and light fast, and then I went ahead and erased those pencil guidelines. Now I've made up some colours ready for doing the background. I've made up a quinacridine gold with a little bit of Winsor violet added. That was for the baubles, so they're not just as bright as the lights. And then the green for the tree is made up of sap green with a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I may make one or two more colours up as I go along. So you don't have to completely copy the actual composition of the photograph itself. You might want to alter things a little bit, and what I'm going to do is, you can see here we've got lights going right out to the edge. What I wanted to do was put things sort of around the cone and leave some of this up here more white paper. Makes a nice composition just having that little cone nestled in the middle with just a few things around here. So to begin with some nice clean water, I'm going to paint on some circles for the lights of water. Get a little bit of that quinacridine and just drop that into that and leave it to move out into that water, and then it's like a little hazy background light. Alter the sizes of these little circles, because obviously some of the lights are going to be further away than others, and leave little light patches on if you want as well. You could make some of them quite big, as if the light's really close to the cone. Dropping the water down first and then popping the paint in there prevents you from having a really hard edge on that, and makes it a little bit more diffused looking and out of focus and more impressionistic. One up here perhaps. So think about your composition, don't have them too uniform. Tiny little dot there. And actually, if we look on the picture itself, there's a very big light around the back here, which is nice because it's sort of contrasting with the cone, and it's behind the cone, nestling behind there. But I'm not going to overdo it with these. Perhaps just one or two more. One there. And this here, I'm just going to take a little bit of that water out of that. That was very, very wet. And then if you did want to just soften any of these edges off whilst they're still damp, you can do that as well. Okay, and I think that's enough for the lights. Now the bauble is obviously a lot bigger, and I'm going to put the bauble more to this side than it is on the picture. On the picture it's touching the cone more, but I'm going to put it up here, really because I want the cone to be the focal point, not the baubles. If you're worried about making a complete circle when you can't see what you're painting, when it's just water, you might want to put some pencil guidelines down that you could obviously remove later on. And go in the shape of the sphere. Once you've got a nice sphere shape that you're happy with, and again, don't forget you want it to be quite hazy looking. You don't want it to look perfect because it wants to be disappearing off into the background. But you might want to just put more colour on one side or the other to make it more of a 3D spherical object. Here I'm going to pop a lot more colour into the base. And around where it's fastened onto the tree, and we'll put a little bit of an indication of its fastening there. So obviously I've drawn that sphere freehand. Like I say, you may want to just draw around something if you want to be more precise. But don't forget, these are going to disappear into the background. So that for me is enough for the lights and the bauble. So now I'm going to put a little indication of some green behind. Obviously you're going to have some green here because that's where the bauble's fastened on. It can't be sat on nothing. So just think about that. And some behind. So we're not doing these parts, we're doing behind. Don't worry that yellow's gone into that green, it really doesn't matter. In fact, what I should have done was do them one at a time, and then I can see where I've gone. So I'll just re-wet that area there. And just flick the brush out a little bit as well. Give that impression of some little bits of twigs and needles. But having that little bit of water there first of all will really soften that and send it back away from these foreground colours. And look how they're mixing into each other here. Don't worry about that, that looks quite pretty. Got some more green coming towards here. And you can just tweak about, think where it's going to look better. On the actual picture there's not much green up here, but I think that just looks nicer mixed into those one or two lights, having that green going between them. Now at this point, while your brush is still wet and this paint's still wet, just here and there, just sort of move the paint around a little bit, make one or two more lines, just because they're very, very prickly are these trees, and although it is quite impressionistic behind here and we don't want to be doing the detail, you do want it to still give that impression that it is a prickly tree behind there. So just in one or two places, just flick and see how loosely I'm holding the brush at this point. And then where it's wet, just in places, add a little bit of the extra green, just so that we've got a bit of difference in tone, some light and dark areas. So again, you're going to get lots of shadow in there. And at this stage I will actually get another little bit of that darker quinacridone with the violet in it, and add a little bit more shadow to this bauble. And if you wanted, you could lift also a highlight out. So I'm just going to take a highlight out there. Just dry the paper there so it's not running anymore. So just watch for where things are running, and all you need to do is make sure the paper's dry to stop it running anymore. I think that's actually enough colour for in the background. I'm not going to put any more in. If you wanted, you could alter this picture quite a bit by putting coloured lights and coloured baubles behind if you wanted to. So don't feel you've got to do it exactly the same as me. You could make more of it by putting lots more colour in there. I wanted to keep it quite subtle, but I think I will let that dry completely before I paint the cone. Otherwise we're going to risk those colours running into each other. So just leave it now to completely dry. Okay, so whilst that was drying, I've made up some more colours. So I've got raw umber, burnt umber with a little bit of French ultramarine added to make it darker. Again, some sap green with some alizarin. This time they're quite a bit thicker than these background colours. They've got a lot less water in them in order for the foreground to pop out more from the background. So I'll start with this raw umber, which I've not added anything else to. And this is really a perfect colour for this cone. So I'm going to cover the whole thing, and I haven't wet it first. I'm just going to fill it in. Now I'm going to let that dry a little bit, but not completely. So whilst I'm letting that dry a little bit, I'm going to move on to putting some of the green in. And again, like before, we want to just be flicking the brush a little bit. You don't have to go over every pen line. The pen lines are still going to show through as this paint dries. You'll still have that nice drawing underneath, but just flick your wrist and then you get that nice tapering feel for those leaves. Leave some gaps to let the light come through as well. Don't block the whole thing in, because like I say, you've still got that nice ink drawing that's going to be showing through there. Here at the end, like I mentioned earlier, because it's facing us, it's a very different shape. So just look carefully at the way those needles are sort of angled. And again, this one's coming towards us, so we've got a lot going in this direction. A bit like a palm tree in a way, the way it's all curling over. So get some nice curves and curls and flicks with that brush, and leave lots of little gaps as well. And you can see now that because we've got a lot less water in this paint, it's much thicker. It's looking closer to us already than those background leaves. Okay, so that's given the cone a little bit of a chance to just dry slightly, and then we can get that darker colour and look at where those shadows are and just pop the darker colour in. And you've already put the shadows there a lot with the pen, so you're just going over the top of that in places, and it's just going to give it a little bit more form. But because it's not quite dry, it's going to be a nice soft edge to those shadows. And as well as coming over the top with that brown, I'm also going to use this same one again, the first one that I used, and just put another layer on top in places. get the shapes of some of those tips, the way it curves around. Just going to give it a little bit more form. You know, don't forget when you're doing ink and wash that you've got your detail there really with your pen, which is all going to show through once your paint's dried. You're still going to have those pen lines there, so you don't want to be doing too much more detail with your paint. If that's the kind of painting you prefer, then you're probably best just doing a pencil line, a very fine pencil line, and doing your actual drawing with your paint. Okay, so that just gives it a bit more definition. I'm just not sure about my colour choices, whether that's actually brown enough. But I don't think I want it any darker because it will cover up that pen. Okay, and now I'm going to put some more of the green again because that's started to dry. I'm just going to go darker in one or two places. Think about where it's going to be in the shade more, nearer to the cone. You could use a darker colour, but sometimes it's easiest just to go over with another layer of the same colour if you're trying to keep your picture nice and simple. And actually I'm just going to get a little bit of that brown. Sometimes you have these little ends to the branches where you've got, I don't know what it's called, but you know, where there's going to be a cone forming, I suppose. You get those little ends. And I'm going to get the darker brown and go along the centre. Again, it's not quite dry, so it will bleed into your green a little bit. Just break that up a bit, don't make it a completely solid line. Just put some touches nearer to there where it's obviously going to be very shady. And then I'm going to go back and get some of the gold and put that on the tips. So if we've got some light shining here and there. And also a little bit on the cone itself, because obviously it's going to be reflecting a little bit of the light. So looking at it now, what I'm not happy with really is this area, because I feel that we need something darker behind there to make that come out from that bauble. So I'm actually going to turn the paper around and I'm just going to go in with a little bit of that green. Right up to the cone and along the edge of the bauble there. And then I'm going to get a damp brush and just soften that edge off. And I just think that's better with something behind there, and in fact I'm going to drop a little bit more in right into that corner there, just to bring the comb forward really and send the background back a little bit. And I much prefer that now. In fact I'm going to do a little bit more of that here. Just a tiny touch. Okay, when you get to this point you might think you've finished, and it's a good time to stand back and think about things that you like or you don't like about it. I'm not overly convinced by this bit up here. I just feel that that's too blocky, so I might just lift a little bit of that out. So So if you just get some water on your brush and a tissue, you can just take areas out here and there that you're not happy with, just to soften them a bit, and again send them further into the distance. And by taking a little bit of paint off here and there, it also makes the light look as if it's bouncing around a little bit more. I just feel at the moment that this bauble and the tree behind it here is too dominant, although it's a lot softer in colour than the foreground. I don't like how it's dried on that edge there and how straight it is. So maybe really I should have taken a lot more time over the thinking about where I was going to put those greens, in the same way that I did with the little lights. So you can save things with watercolour. Like I said, I've never used this paper before, so I wasn't sure how it was going to work on this paper, but actually it's lifting very nicely. It's a good one to lift the paint from the paper if you do go wrong. So there are all sorts of ways of rescuing watercolours if you're not happy with them. And I think that's actually better. I think that's made the foreground come further forward and just pop those colours further back. You can just lift it off with the tissue to just fade it away a little bit and give that impressionistic feel to it. Okay, I think that's better, and hopefully gives the impression of that spruce and the baubles and the lights in the background. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Don't forget that you can get that picture linked down below in the description on Pixabay there. And if you want, you can put a lot more detail in the art than I have, because you could do every single little leaf if you wanted to. We've got more green over here. I wanted the composition to be that we left this area white. I think that's quite nice, just to make this little sort of sprig shape coming out from here. You could just do this cone with the sprig coming out and not do any of the background. That would also look really nice. So there's all sorts of things you can do with photographs to alter them, and that's a bit like I was saying in last week when we were doing the penguins, or a couple of weeks ago. If you didn't see that video, I will link it up here, about how we should alter photographs that we use as reference photographs and not just slavishly copy them. Okay, and again, if you wanted to put the detail in the background, you could put more of these lines in the baubles and more of the lines of the trees and things to get that detail in if you wanted to. It all depends on your style. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. As far as the paper goes, I would say yes, I really do like it with watercolour. So next time I use this pad, I will come back and use it with a different media, a different mixed media, because it is supposed to be a mixed media pad. So I'll give it a go with all different mixed media and see how it goes with that. But as I said, I didn't tape it down and it's not cockled, it's stayed nicely flat. So, and I have used quite a bit of water on some of these background areas. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy doing that if you have a go, and I'll be back again with you next week with another tutorial or demonstration. Bye for now.